President Biden might want Rahm Emanuel to join his administration, despite obviously deep opposition from progressives and anyone with a soul. As the nation's John Nichols notes, objections to Emanuel stem from his 8-year track record in Chicago, where he was dubbed Mayor 1% by his constituents, not to mention, of course, his term in federal government.
That's right. So national affairs correspondent at The Nation, John Nichols, he joins us now to discuss. So, John, it looks like Rahm Emanuel is up for a big position either in China or Japan, as we were just discussing. What are the objections on a policy level from a left perspective, from a centrist perspective, to why he would be a terrible ambassador?
Actually, I think it's across the board. Yeah. The interesting thing is that Rahm Emanuel makes enemies, and he's made a lot of them over the years, in part because he's not very nice to people. The record we could go through at great length, but also because he's often wrong and fundamentally wrong. As was mentioned briefly, his Chicago record was a devastating record, and covering up police shootings at times when it was potentially politically beneficial to him, closing schools, really governing in a way that so divided the city that some of the most ardent opposition to him getting any position in the Biden administration comes from people who worked with him in Chicago. But on a deeper, longer-term sense, when you talk about these ambassadorships, you want to look back to his tenure in the Clinton and Obama administrations. And it's really important to understand that he was a driving force in both of those administrations, especially in the really throughout much of the Clinton terms and at the early stages of Obama. And his great passion was neoliberalism. He was an intense supporter of trade deals. He was a big strategist on NAFTA, entering the WTO, beginning the liberalization of trade with China, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. After he got into the Obama White House, he was a huge advocate for the Trans-Pacific Partnership and other trade deals. So when you start to talk about sending him to Beijing or to Tokyo as an ambassador, you are talking about a supporter of some of the most disastrous trade policies in American history being in a position to advance the next stages of those trade policies.
Can you elaborate on that, John? If he ends up in China or if he ends up in Japan, what would that practically mean?
Both the Japan and China ambassadorships are prestige ambassadorships, which tend to go to senior figures with a lot of connections in Washington. They don't tend to go to career diplomats. They tend to go to somebody who can talk directly to the president, because those are major economies, those are major trading partners. And so by the nature of those ambassadorships, the person who is sent there is very central to establishing a lot of our trade policies, a lot of our economic policies. Now, there's also military policy as well. There's no doubt of that. And relations with China especially have been tense on a number of levels. But what I'm very concerned about putting Rahm Emanuel in either of those positions is that I think he will have the year, if he's the ambassador, he will have the year of Joe Biden as regards our economic policies and our trade policies with some of the major economies in the world, and really an area where previous administrations have been very desirous to establish trade policies that happen to be incredibly good for multinational corporations, and frankly, very, very bad for workers in the U.S. and frankly in other countries, as well as for human rights.
Yeah,
so
and
I think putting Rahm Emanuel there is a very dangerous game.
And I think it's a very important thing for people to understand, which is that the Biden administration, by all accounts, has not ruled out moving forward with TPP, especially if you see the economy improve. I mean, these are all things they were very much committed to and refused to rule out there on the campaign trail. And I guess the real question there, John, is do enough people care in order to block this nomination within the Democratic and Republicans will almost certainly oppose him, like you said, just for partisan reasons in general. But are there enough Democrats in order to block this?
This is the key question, and it's a really important one. Now, it happens that I think trade policy is the great dividing, one of the great dividing issues in the Democratic Party. It's way undercovered by our media. Especially elite media tends to, still be very, very in favor of a corporate model on free trade. And so you will definitely see a lot of Democrats line up in favor of whoever Biden appoints. But my suspicion is that if these issues are amplified, if the discussion gets serious, that Emanuel would have a very hard time, certainly getting an ambassadorship to China and potentially to Japan as well. I think there are people in the Democratic caucus in the Senate who might well vote no.
Mm-hmm. Very, very interesting. John, thank you so much for breaking this down.
Thanks, John.
It's an honor to be with both of you, as always.
Always.
Absolutely.
More Rising for you after this.